The idea behind the show is simply asking guests what they would tell a stranger on a plane if they were sitting next to them and the stranger asked them for advice.
The scenery is passing very fast, but the seer is constant. The one who's seeing is the same.
Let me appreciate you for asking a question that I haven't been asked after 2,500 or so interviews over the years.
Is you have to drop the ego, which is everyone's greatest obstacle.
In 2008, Grant and I had been married for 4 years. I was pregnant with my first child. The economy was collapsing, and we were on the verge of losing everything financially.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the latest edition of the show, and I'm super stoked to have a brand new guest with us today, Mr. Colin Mochrie. Super excited to have you here. And Colin, I've watched you on, for example, Whose Line Is That Anyway? It seems like forever. Before we jump into some key questions I wanted to ask you, I see that you have a new show out now. Now I'm going to probably pronounce it improperly, but Hip-Prov?
You pronounced it correctly.
Oh, I did.
You've done very well, because many people go for high-prov, which I think is a different kind of improv involving illegal substances.
Well, and I was just kind of sounding it out by the hypnosis part. I was trying to say what would I think the two merged together would be. So can you? I mean, the show is seems to be getting rave reviews. So can you tell us a little bit about sort of how that show came to life?
Yeah. There's this hypnotist extraordinaire, Asad Meki, and he was taking classes at Second City, taking improv classes to sort of get better at his craft. And he realized that the exercises that the instructors were giving them were to get people out of their head and sort of create unconscious comedy. And he thought, oh, that's kind of what I do with hypnosis. So he contacted me and said, I had this idea for a show where we combine these two. Would you want to try it? And I went, sure, sounds terrifying. What could go wrong? And so we did it. We really just jumped into it because there was no way we could rehearse. We had to go out there in blind faith. And I made the mistake just before we went on for our very first show. I said, hey, Asad, if I ask them to do this, will they do it? And he said, I don't know. Depends on the subject. Some will do it right away. Some it'll seem like they're a little stoned. Some just will stare at you. I thought, oh, this is the question I should have asked maybe a little while ago. But it all turned out. The beauty is the hypnosis gets rid of the part of your brain that deals with self-criticism, that tells you, oh, you can't do this, you're going to be embarrassed. So they become pure improvisers. They just immediately react to everything that we give them. And they've come up with stuff that I don't think a real improviser would come up with, because it's just true. It truly is stream of consciousness and so out there that I think, wow, this is, that's what I love about it. It's like, I can't, when I'm working with the Whose Line guys or whatever, we've worked together for so long, I can kind of see, okay, I know kind of where they're going. These people, no idea.
Well, and so I guess we can also say no show's ever the same, clearly.
No, not even close. It's controlled madness, I think, is the best way to put it.
Well, and let me ask you this. So, I mean, improv, I know, is the same, like in the sense you're very seldom ever going to have the same show or performance, because as long as you throw new ideas in the mix. But with hypnosis, I mean, I just talked to somebody the other day about this, how a lot of people are terrified of the idea of hypnosis. So, for example, one person told me she does therapeutic hypnosis, and she said people, when she tells them that at parties, they like back away because they think she's going to try to hypnotize them now. But they think of those stage shows where they've maybe seen their friend do something maybe that they would never do. Do you guys run into that at all? Like, is there any apprehension?
There's so many misconceptions about hypnosis and improv. I mean, first of all, a lot of people are skeptical about both of them. A lot of people think the improviser has somehow pre-written 5,000 scenes so that if anything comes up that's yelled to them, they immediately can go, oh, I can do this scene. And same with hypnosis. People feel it's, I guess I was sort of on the fence, but having worked in the show, it's as every night I watch Assad put these people under, and he starts off with 20, gets it down to the best 5, and I can see, okay, they're faking, oh, they're in, oh, okay, they're under, and hopefully by the end of the show we've made some converts. But there are people who are afraid to do it, thinking, I mean, when you're hypnotized, you can't do anything that goes against your moral upbringing. You're not going to all of a sudden kill someone. And also, our show is all about we're hypnotizing these people to be part of a team. So it's not like we're making fun of them. We're including them. They're actually the stars of the show, and I'm just sort of there as support.
And so, before I move in a different direction, at the show itself, how essentially is the audience kind of picked? Like, do you guys ask for volunteers, and then they, just like you'd see in a normal hypnosis show? And
Yeah, it's for me, I don't understand it myself, but it's like a stampede. It's like people just rush the stage, and yeah. So, and yeah, anyone who, it's usually people closer to the front, but yeah, anyone is if you can make your way to the stage, then you have a chance to be hypnotized.
And I guess at the same time, to your point, which I never thought of that before, but there are some people that you can see that are actually trying to fake it so they can be part of the show.
Yeah, yeah, and I think Assad said the stats are like 20% of the population can be hypnotized for stage shows. It's different for therapeutic hypnosis, like to stop smoking or whatever. It's higher, but for stage shows, because I guess because there's so many, like the lights and the audience, that can screw with up with everything. So that's why he asked for 20 people, and I think the least amount we've got. I did the show with 2 people, which was interesting, but usually we get 4 to 5 people.
Amazing. And I said I wanted to switch gears. I mean, it's still along the same lines, but being in the entertainment industry, I'm going to say, I mean, I'm not going to compare them, but I spent years performing stand-up in the local clubs, the Yuck Yucks and stuff, and playing music in clubs and what have you. And, you know, there's this common thing, especially in the Canadian entertainment industry, it's not super easy to earn a living. And so I'd love to ask you, you know, as somebody who's been in the industry for a long time, how do you define success, either personally or as it relates to the entertainment industry?
Oh, being able to be with people you love and to do what you love, that's really all I need. I mean, obviously, if you look at back in my career, there really wasn't a roadmap. It was blind luck. The fact that this show came from England that could spotlight the one talent I have. I mean, I was incredibly lucky. I'm doing a job that didn't exist when I was growing up. No one ever said, "Oh, I'm going to be an improviser," because there was no such thing. So for me, being able to do that is an incredible success. Being able to do what I love and be able to go around the world and work with different people around the world doing this amazing thing, for me, that is the epitome of I've gotten somewhere without actually doing a lot of work.
I love that. We actually brought in a UFC guy for a mastermind we did recently, and he said his goal was to do the least amount of work possible. So that's why I went into the UFC. He said, because I got paid money just to be punched in the face. And I thought, I don't know if that's easy work. Like that's
really. No, I prefer my way.
Yeah, and these guys are big dudes, like that are punching
Yeah.
and know what they're doing. So
Yeah.
I was surprised to hear that, but he's a pretty big dude as well. But you know, in terms of then I love what you said there about loving what you do and who you're doing it with. I remember I heard a quote one time that Bob Dylan said, success for him is if he wakes up in the morning and he goes to bed at night, but in between those hours, he does that which he loves, that's success to him. And, you know, we hear it a lot, like the cliche, you never work a day in your life if you love what you do. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of these cliches are cliches because they're true.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't imagine doing anything else because I can't imagine doing it. There's nothing else I can do. So, but there's never a point before a show where I go, oh, no, this again. It's just every night. It's like, I don't know what's going to happen. And I love that. And I've been very fortunate. My wife, Deb, and I, we've been together for 33 years and still like each other, even through a pandemic where I was home for the longest time, I think, in 20 years. And we found, oh, we do still like each other and have fun. So yeah, I'm pretty lucky.
And so before I move now in a different direction, I have two questions I like to ask every guest. But one of the things I want to touch on is you mentioned the basically that you were able to land this job that didn't exist when you were growing up. Are you a believer? You know, I hear a lot when I talk to people about this idea of synchronicity, like things are happening sort of for you versus coincidence. Do you think like, or did you see that there were things that had to line up for you to be the person that ended up on Whose Line Is It Anyway? Or do you think it was just a coincidence?
There were so many ways that I could have screwed this up. I was the first time I auditioned for Whose Line, we were in Toronto. I was at Second City. We'd done a show, and it was a really good show. The producers were doing a cross-country tour, audition tour. They liked the show. They asked us to audition for the show next morning at 8 o'clock. Not the best time for comedy. That's not an excuse, but not a good time for comedy. So we auditioned, but because we'd worked together as a cast at that point, we were doing what you do in improv. Everybody was sort of supporting each other and then building up, and so nobody stood out, so none of us got it. And then the next time I auditioned, we had moved down to LA because Deb had was producing a show down there. I auditioned again, and it was with people I didn't know. So it was like, hey, screw you, look at me. And that's when I got it. Then my first show, I sucked. I totally got into my head. I thought, they're not going to, even though we speak the same language, they're British, they're not going to, so sucked. The thing that has kept my life above water has been Ryan Stiles. Because Ryan, we grew up together in Vancouver, and then he was doing Whose Line, and of course, I mean, the man, in a way, kind of too stupid to be scared. So he did really well. So they were doing some shows in New York, and he said, you know, why don't you bring Colin back? Because I think you'll find something in him. And so when they brought me back, they paired me up with Ryan, who I'd known each other, you know, forever. So it sort of went from there. And then every year I would come in and they say, we're going to give you one show and see how it goes. And then I would end up doing the entire season. And that did not stop until the last season we shot in Britain, where they said, okay, you're in all the shows this time. But every year was like one, maybe two. We'll see how it goes.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that. That's amazing. And yeah, as far as you know, what you mentioned about the comedy and early morning, and I performed at Second City at the school part, like not the Second City part, but the school. They used to have like almost like an open call for local comics and stuff. And a buddy of mine was there, and he said, "Hey, do you want to perform at Second City?" I said, "That sounds epic." But if I remember correctly, Colin, I think it was like early in the morning. Like, I think it was the same thing. I was like, why am I? It seems so weird to be performing.
It feels like in comedy auditions, they try to make it as difficult as possible. I don't know if they're trying to see, well, let's see how they deal with these conditions. And then when it's perfect conditions, they'll be super funny. I have no idea what it is. But yeah, it's like, you know, give people a chance. That's all I'm asking. And, you know, comedians aren't usually early morning people. You know, usually their gigs are late at night. And then after the gig, you're talking with people. And so, yeah, that should change. They got to change that.
100%. So I said I had two main questions I want to ask you before we let you run. First one, and they're very similar questions. The first one is really what inspired the show. I call it the enlightened passenger question, or the passenger question. And here's the simple question. If you're on a plane, strangers on the plane next to you, they lean over and say, "Hey, I need some life advice. What do you got?" What do you think you might tell a stranger on a plane if they ask you for life advice?
Good question. You know, everybody has their own thing. Look for what you love and then go for it. You know, I always get a lot of people like, how do I become like, how do I get on Whose Line, and how do I become a world-known improviser? And I go, it's not going to happen. We lucked out, and we kind of, that's it for now. Maybe later. But my thing is, I always say, if you're going to improvise, if you're going to be in entertainment, if there's something else you love, do that, because this is a horrible business in many ways. When it goes great, that's wonderful. But getting there, it's a tough business. And it's hard not to take things personally at times. So that would be my general thing for people going into entertainment. People who are real people, I don't know what to tell them. Find someone who's got your back and just stay with them for your whole life. That's it.
Well, that's powerful advice, I think. Well, now let's flip it, and I should mention, I want to ask you the unofficial question of, maybe stuff you have on the go right now or how people can follow you. But before I go there, my last official question is, I call it the time machine question. So it's similar to the passenger one, but the difference is, and maybe it'll be a similar answer. The difference is, this is what would you say if you could go into a time machine? You could go back and talk to a younger Colin. Would you give him any life advice, or maybe would that steer him off the path of this lucking into this job that didn't exist? So my question again out of that is, what would you tell a younger Colin if you could give him some life advice?
Okay, there's one Colin I'd go back to tell him something. Going back to, I'll get to that in a minute, but going back to younger Colin, I would just say, stop wasting the time you're wasting being afraid. Because I found when I got success in the business, it was because I really just put myself out there. When I screwed up my first show in Whose Line, it was because I was doubting myself. I pulled back, and as a result of that, I didn't do anything. I just kind of stood there. So I would say, always attack, always go for it. Then there'd be one specific moment. I was in an airplane, which fits with this entire thing. And it was with my daughter was on one side. On the across the aisle was my wife. Sitting next to her was a pilot. And we were flying, and then the plane did something weird. And it was at a time when my wife was a little leery about flying. So she turned to the pilot and said, "What was that?" He said, "Well, it could be anything. It's probably," he said, "They're serving lunch now. If there was any kind of problem, they wouldn't be serving lunch." At that point, the flight attendant runs down the aisle and starts taking all our food away. Then the pilot comes on. He's going, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a little problem. There's something, we have to make an emergency landing. So we're going to be landing in Charlotte. You'll see a lot of ambulances and fire trucks. That is just standard. That is what we have to do. It has nothing to do with what's going on. So please, we'll be landing in a couple of minutes." So there's complete silence on the plane, just silence. And my wife turns to me and mouths, "I love you." And I look at her and I went, "Oh." Now, what I was trying to convey was that everything's fine. We're going to survive. But it may not have been the best way to. So I would go back and say, "Colin, look, Deb's going to say I love you in a second. Just look at her and with tears in your eyes, say I love her back. That's it." Because if you say what you think you have to say, you're going to hear about it every year for the rest of your life.
Wow, that's precise advice, and
it's pretty precise.
But maybe good for other men or women who are thinking about saying, like that. I like that reply.
And there's a follow-up to the story. Like a couple of years later, we were in Stratford, Ontario. We were walking by and someone said, "Hey, Colin." And there's this guy in the patio and goes, "I was on the flight that had to land." He was one of the pilots. And what had happened was it was overbooked. So there was an Air Canada mechanic going somewhere else. So he sat in the cockpit with him. The computer was giving them a signal that there wasn't enough fuel going to one of the engines. So the pilot was going to turn off the engine and then restart. And the mechanic said, "You know what? I don't think that's right. I think there's something wrong with this reading, not with the engine." So that's why they landed. And they found if he had done that, the engine would have blown up. So I'm guessing there's a moral there. I'm not quite sure what it is. You just never know what's going to happen. So be happy, do what you love, tell people you love them, because you never know.
And one thing I took from this conversation as well, Colin, as we wind down, is that you're not like you talked about early on, like that first show, you didn't do well because you're in your head and what have you. So I took it from it. You haven't always been like being. So when people think improv, I think everybody thinks these guys are masters at improvisation, so they're confident all the time, never worried or scared or anything. The question, I guess, out of that is, obviously, it sounds like it wasn't early on, but is it different now, or do you still get nervous?
Oh yeah, there's always that little thing before the show where, okay, there's an audience, they paid money, we have nothing for them. So there is that. And then once you're out there, you're fine. And also, I think once you get older, you don't care as much in that way. Of course, you want to do a great show, but it's like, there's always the opportunity you're going to bomb. And, the more you do it, the more you learn how to embrace the bomb and how to enjoy that. When we early on, there was one show that there was Brad Sherwood, Ryan Stiles, and I. We did it it went horribly. The show ended. We all left without saying anything. We went into our separate cars, went home, and didn't talk to each other for 2 weeks. It was that horrendous. It was just and it was supposed to be 10 minutes, but because we weren't getting laughs, we thought, oh no, we'll just keep going till we get a good one to end on. No, it wasn't happening. That was horrific. But if that happened now, I'd be enjoying it so much more.
Love it. So, Colin Mochrie, this has been an absolute pleasure. Like I said, I want to ask you though, just for those that may want to find out about the show that you're doing, the hip hop show, or the or anything else that you have in the go, what would you kind of say to people that want to keep up with what you're doing? And is there anything new you want to share before we?
Let me see. I'm on Twitter at Colin Mochrie. If you go to colinandbradshow.com, Brad Sherwood and I have been doing a show for 20 years. We're coming to Mississauga in December for you Ontarians. But we have a lot of shows that has our schedule. I'm also doing Hipprov at hipprov.com. That also, we're doing an Ontario tour, I believe in the fall. Nope, not the fall. In January, February. And I think that's it. There's things come up out of nowhere. So as I say, obviously I have no career plan. I just sit back and see, oh, okay, let's do this. So you'll know as soon as I know.
Well, and the universe obviously takes care of you. So
so far,
it all seems to work out. And I saw I'm in the East Coast in Canada when I'm not traveling. I travel a lot, but when I'm not traveling, I'm down by like Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, PEI. And I saw that you're actually coming through this part of the world too, I think in February.
To Halifax, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I'm going to try to check it out. So that's yeah, absolutely. So Colin, like I say, this has been an absolute pleasure. I thank you so much. And we'll do everything we can to wave the flag for all the great stuff that you're doing.
Thanks, Corey.
Awesome. Thanks so much.